Welcome everyone to our presentation about HTML and CSS. So I'm Kaylee, and I'm here with...
And I'm Zilpha. And yeah, let's get started.
Awesome. So my name is Kaylee, and I'm going into second year, and I'm studying computer science and business administration. So I'm a participant experience director at TioHacks, and I love badminton and photography.
And my name is Zilpha, and I'm a second year or third year biomedical engineering student at Ryerson. I'm the mentorship program coordinator at TO Hacks, and I love soccer, bubble tea, programming, and I'm a certified nerd.
And just a quick thing before we get started. We encourage you guys all to type in the chat. We want this to be a more interactive workshop. So yeah, hi Rosie.
And so the structure of the workshop will be as follows. We'll go briefly over web development, then dive into HTML and CSS. Then we can see some applications and provide some resources for you to use. And if you have any questions, we'll have a session at the end.
Yeah. So what exactly is web development? So web development is anything websites. So it's the best way to bring awareness to anything, whether it's a personal website, a service or a product, or even like a school club. And the best thing about them is the limit is your imagination. So you can create like plain static websites to super cool and complex websites. So we have like two examples here. So as we can see, there's the Apple website, which is like I guess just text and pictures. So I'd say it's a little bit plain. So there's links to other other places, and as you can see, yeah. So it's like pretty plain. But then if you look at the Year of Greta, you can see how already right off the bat we can see a bunch of animations, but it gets even cooler. And this is all just a website, which is really incredible. So it's actually a 3D image of Greta Thunberg. And if you press explore, and then you can drag around and you can see she has her whole timeline, and it's like it's super cool. It like moves around and it's all animated, and this is just a website. So um, and that's just to give you guys a little bit of inspiration of what you guys can do with web development. Awesome.
All right. So now that we have an overview of web development, let's talk about HTML and how we can use it. So HTML is a markup language, and it stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And you're probably wondering, what is a markup language? It's basically a system for creating your document in a way that it's different from the text. So when your document is processed for display, the markup language is not shown, only the text formatting. And this markup language consists of tags, which describe the document content. And HTML contains tags and plain text. HTML is a foundation of any website and contains the information that tells the browser, hey, this is what I need to be on the page, and this is the links that I need to be on it. And these are images that I want to have. It also prioritizes the text, so but it has little freedom on the overall styling of your webpage of your website. So if you want to think about it in this way, basically HTML is like the skeleton of your website. It tells you the components of the creature and how the components are organized. HTML is used everywhere. Every page that we see in the World Wide Web is written using a version of HTML. A complete set of web pages is called a website, and HTML allows for the linking or communication between these pages. Emails are also written in HTML, and they format the text messages, links, tables, and other elements. But you can't edit the HTML directly. There's tools that correspond to the HTML internally. Okay, so now that we know about what HTML is and why it's important, we can get into how we can use it. So over here, we'll be covering the basics of HTML, of an HTML document, and breaking down some of the most important tags to know. Then we'll talk about semantic elements and coding conventions when using HTML. Okay, so here's a very basic example of HTML code. And we'll kind of break this all down, right? So each of these tags, the ones with the arrows, define an HTML element, and there's different types of HTML elements. And you should know that elements are everything from the start tags, content, and the end tags. The doc type HTML tag is called the declaration and defines our document as an HTML5 document, while the HTML tag is called the root element of the page. And then we have the head tag, which basically contains the metadata or the data about the HTML page and isn't really shown on the page itself. Then we have the body tag, which basically says, this is all the information that I need on the page contained here. And within the body, we have other elements like headers, paragraphs, or text, images, and empty tags. And I'll kind of show you those in the next slide. And one thing to remember is that you should always close your elements with the end tag. You shouldn't ever forget them. All right. So just a few points to keep in mind. Different headers have different sizes. So you have H1 and H2 here. And H2 will give a smaller font size than H1. And then you have your paragraphs and a break tag. So the break tag is called an empty element, and it doesn't require an end tag. It's just for formatting. And then you have what's called a link tag. It's called the ahref tag. This is basically a way to link something in your web page. It has many uses. Over here, you can see I nested the href tag as a paragraph, and it's very common and allows your viewers to know where to click and where it will take you. And then we have your image tag. So it basically links an image as a URL and displays it as on your web page. So the tag itself holds the space for the image in question, and it doesn't really have an end tag. It's also empty. And then there's this thing called attributes. So image tags have a source and alt attribute. Source is basically the path to the image, and alt is the text in case the image doesn't load for some reason. I've also attached some styling to the image. So these are just some styling attributes to change up your image display. Okay, so HTML it has different aspects to it and has this thing called semantic elements. And they're pretty important to talk about. So basically semantic elements are, so they basically describe or they give meaning to both the browser and the developer. The content is very easy and clear to understand. So for example, you have a header, a footer, and we know what those are and what they define, like different parts of the web page. And non-semantic elements don't tell us anything about the content, and you have to specify within the tag what part of the document it defines. So here we have an example. Non-semantic would be div and span, and semantic would be foreign, table, and image. Semantic elements are an easy way to allow data to be shared and reused across applications. And in the next slide, we kind of just have a table that kind of gives you a guide to semantic elements and where they should be used. Okay, now on to the part where most beginners have a lot of trouble with, especially me, coding conventions. There may be some strict rules that you have to follow, but most of the time, some rules are just there to make your code look clean and easy. So you're probably wondering, why is this important? So imagine looking at a science fair project and seeing the messy, spacey, and hard to read display or presentation. So it's just better for you to make your code look clean so other developers can use it and understand it. And we could kind of like go over them. So the first one would be to use the correct document type. To try using lower element names and attribute names because it's just easier and cleaner to write. Try to close all your elements. Sometimes even if they don't require, but if they're empty attribute elements, they don't really need them. You should quote your attribute name. So if you have your div element, then you should quote it and give it a class name. you should specify alt attribute. So obviously, like when you have your image tag, give it an alt attribute. Avoid spacing where unnecessary. That's a big thing. And don't ever forget the title or the head. So of course, like as you go on, these coding conventions become easier to use, and you kind of get used to them with practice and experience.
Yeah, so with all of that HTML knowledge, you can now create a website that has text with possibly different font sizes, but overall it'll look pretty ugly. So then how do we make it a little bit more pretty? So that's where CSS comes into play. Yeah, so CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. So it makes a website look super sexy. So a CSS rule has two main parts, a selector and one or more declarations. As you can see from the picture, it shows like a pretty clear way of how you should format the CSS rule. So the selector is the HTML element that you want to style, and each declaration consists of a property and a value. So the element selector selects elements based on the element name, and the styling will affect all elements sharing the same name. So as we remember from Zolfa's couple of slides about HTML, she showed that there was like different headers, so heading 1, header 2. So with this code, as you see in the image, it'll change the header 1 or anything that has this the tag header 1 to the color blue and the font size 12. And this is an example for a different HTML element. So for a paragraph, we can see that we changed it into the color red, and then the text align center, which is just aligns all the text that's in the paragraph to the center of the web page. And as you can see on the right side, there's an example where if you wanted to pair a lot or have a lot of different HTML elements with the same sort of properties, then we could just do a comma. So that's called grouping. Yeah. And then, so now we'll move on to the ID and class selector. So the ID selector is used to style a unique element. So it uses the ID attribute and is defined with a hashtag. As you can see in the example, this is what it would look like. So beforehand, when we had HTML elements, we didn't have the hashtag, but now we do want to include it. And so we have the hashtag, and then it's still the same formatting where you put the same, the declarations are all the same. So for the usage, this is what you would see in HTML. So you would have the HTML elements, and then afterwards you would put ID is equal to whatever you want to name it. And then from there, that's how you link the CSS and the HTML together. And so unlike the ID, there's also a class selector. So unlike the ID, the class selector can style several elements. So HTML elements sharing a class share the same style. So it uses the class attribute and is defined with a period, so instead of the hashtag. So do not start a class name with a number because that just doesn't work. So for example, we have these two right here, so .center or p.center. So P is if you wanted to pair it with the paragraph HTML element. So yeah, and then in the usage, it's just a little bit different. Instead of doing ID is equal to, as we saw in the previous example, this one would be class is equal to. And yeah, so now there's actually 3 ways to insert style sheets with and incorporate it with HTML. So from the previous code that you saw from Zolfa's slides, we have to link our CSS styling with the HTML side of things. So the first way is through an external style sheet. So here we have in the head portion that Zolfa had shown previously, all we need to do is just type in this code. So link rel style sheet type text CSS, and then ref style.css. So that part is the important part. So style.css, that's whatever you name your CSS sheet. So if you named it zolfa.css, then you would have to type in zolfa.css here. And yeah, so the second internal is through the internal style sheet. So here you would incorporate the style sheet within your HTML file. So just within the head, you would just incorporate a style tag, and then there you can put all of your CSS declarations and properties. And then the last way to insert a style sheet is through an inline style. So here we see right beside the HTML element, we have a style is equal to, and then we have the declaration. So the order matters. So say, for example, so right off the bat, we know if like from header ones, like header twos, there's that browser default styling. So header 1 is a specific sized font, header 2 is a specific sized font. But then if we had an external style sheet, that would override the browser defaults if we had it connected with the HTML elements. And then afterwards, that would be the internal style sheet. So if there were similar or the same elements declared in the external style sheet and the internal style sheet, the internal style sheets would take importance over it. And then the most, I guess, important, or the one that would take over everything else or override everything else, would be the inline style. And so, yeah, so now we'll be moving on to a demo so you guys can get some practice with what we had just talked about. So I'll send over a link in the chat. Here we have an empty sheet right here where we can practice our HTML and CSS. Yeah, so we'll get started here. So the first thing that you want to type is the / doc type HTML, as Zolfa had talked about beforehand. And then as for formatting, or actually I'm just going to give it a couple seconds before we continue, just so that everybody can open up the link. But let us know in the chat if we're going too fast or too slow, or just right. So, okay, yeah, we can continue. So, yeah, every time you open a tag, we want to close the tag. And yeah, so this is like the general formatting that Zolfa is typing up right now. We want the head and the body within the HTML tags. So yeah, we can start with the body. We can start with header 1, maybe. And then we can type in hello, or yeah, no, that works. Yeah. And then after you've typed in a word, you can click run and see what happens. So now we see our first web page. And we were kind of talking about it a little bit before, how there's header 1 and header 2, and they have different default browser settings. So we can show an example of what header 2 would look like. Yeah, so as you can see, it's just a smaller font. And then there's another like pretty important one, which is the paragraph tag. So it's just P. And then this is where you usually type your main text, or like your body paragraphs. Yeah. Yeah, so as you can see, it's like in descending order where like the font size gets smaller and smaller. But let's say we want to change the paragraph to make it a little bit bigger. So how do we do that? So as you remember kind of from the CSS portion of the website, we can style our elements. So here, we want to open the style tag, and we want to close it right after we open it. And yeah, so then we can create P, and then we can change the font size to maybe a little bit bigger. So we can have it font dash size to like, yeah. Awesome. So now you can see it's a little bit bigger now. We can also try to change the font because I think that's Arial. I don't really like Arial, but that's just a personal thing. So we can just type in font family, so font dash family, and then Verdana. Let's say, yeah. And then, yeah, so now we can see the font changed. Yeah, so like maybe another thing like header 1, we can see like maybe we want it to be in the center of the page. Let's try that out. So with the header 1 tag, then we would have, we could text align center. Yeah. Yay. Yeah, so now we have it in the center of the page. Does anyone want to drop down your favorite color? The first person to drop down your favorite color, we're going to change the background of the web page to that color. Orange. Okay. Awesome. So, so for this, we would actually create a body tag because we want our whole body to change. So, and then we would change background color to orange. Thank you, Hunain. There we go. Yeah. And then, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and then there's actually a couple of other things we can try out too that we didn't mention in our presentation, but it's a common thing that we usually use in web pages, and that is HTML tables. So there's actually a tag called tables. So what you can do in the body, so underneath like paragraph, or yeah, we can keep everything. We can do table. You can open table and then close table. So there's things called table rows, which is TR. And then there's HTML elements called table headers, which is TH. And then there's table columns, which is TD. So yeah, so we would do TR for a table row. And then because it's our first, row, we would want it to show our table headers. So we can choose favorite animals. So yeah, wait, actually, why don't we do name in front of that? We can do name and then, so you kind of have to imagine it in your head at the start. So table row, then you would have each row. So now we see the first, in the first cell of the first row, we have the name and then we have favorite animal. So does somebody want to drop down their favorite animal? Or actually, a lot of people. Put down your favorite animal in the chat. And then in the meanwhile, Zulfa, you can put down the next table row. Goose. Okay. I like that. I'm actually down in Waterloo right now, and geese are definitely not my favorite animal. I think it's like mating season or something, and they're very aggressive. Oh wait, sorry, it's also TD for the table columns. And you'll see why later. Oh wait, sorry, that's Hunain. So this is all good. And then we can create one more. And then Zulfa, you can put down your favorite animal. So we'll create another table row. So underneath that. Awesome. yeah, so now we can run the page. And as you can see, the table headers, there's different, like there's two columns for it. And you can see like the table headers are bolded and the table rows or the cells underneath aren't bolded. And what we can actually do is we can actually change the styling of these tables. So we could change, like, let's say the text color of the table header. So you could just write TH in the style tags. And then we could change the color possibly to any color you like. Awesome. So now it's blue. So yeah. Yeah, we can take like any questions you want to have or like any demos specifically you guys want us to do. But that's pretty much like the basics of HTML and CSS. So you guys can create like your personal websites, like add a couple paragraphs about yourself. Or yeah. Great. We could continue and show like, I guess, a couple more attributes in CSS. So, oh yeah. So TRs is like the table row. Oh yeah, sorry. So Stephanie asked, what does the TR and TD mean? So TR is the row, every row. So if you kind of imagine it in your head, every time we open up a TR and like a TR HTML element, and then we close the brackets. So Zolfa, if you could highlight that first TR. Yeah, and then there's that first TR, and then we close that TR. So that's like the first row. So we started the first row, we filled out the elements, and then we ended the first row. And then we opened up a new TR, which brings us to a different row. And then so that's where it brings us to the next row. And then we fill in Hunain and then the goose. And then TD is the table column. So it's just every cell like within the row. Does that make sense? Okay, awesome. Yeah. Yeah, we can try styling a couple other things. How about actually another really useful skill is okay, I'm just reading the Q&A. So I wanted to add an image in background of the web page and then wanted to opaque it. But when I did that, all the text or written got opaque too. So actually, where did you put in the opaque? Like, where did you put that, Rosie? Because what could have happened is you made it opaque within probably like a body tag or like some tag that also encompassed the text. And then that would have like overwritten, or that would have incorporated and changed everything to opaque. But yeah, awesome. So I see the questions are getting answered in the chat, but feel free to keep asking questions. But there's, so there's like another really useful skill to have, and that's ordered and unordered lists. Say you're trying to put your resume or like code in your resume on your web page. So what you would want to do is have a list with bullet points. So what we can do is we can just do it under table. So underneath table, what we can do is create an ordered list. So there's actually two types of lists in HTML. There's ordered and unordered. So unordered is like bullet points. So it's like bullets, and then you can list out anything you would like. And then an ordered list is with numbers. So it's numeric. So it's by like one, like let's say we're listing out animals. So 1 goose, 2 cheetah, and then 3 dogs. So that's the difference between an ordered and an unordered list. So we can actually, if we wanted to section it off, we can do a header tag. We can do like header 2 and say, we can say an unordered list. Yeah. And then and then from here we can start. So we'll start with an unordered list. So this is bullet points. So yeah, so all you need to do is UL, which starts the unordered list, and then LI stands for list. So the list item you put in, yeah, corgis, and then you can keep putting in a couple. All right, yeah. And then once you're done with that ordered list, you just remember to always close the tag. And we can see what it looks like. So now we see the unordered list. And then the awesome thing about it is you can just go back and change if you want to add another list or another list element. And then it'll also show up. And it'll just move everything underneath it, like downwards, but we can see that later. So yeah, we'll go to the ordered list. So this time, all you do instead of UL is you type OL. So we made it really simple. And then it's the same thing, LI for the list item. And then you do, yeah. We could even just copy paste what we have in the unordered list and then just go from there. Awesome. And then we want to close the tag. Yeah. Awesome. So now we have unordered list and ordered list. All right. So we have a question in the chat about how do we add tabs? So actually in like this interface that we're using, so W3 schools, we can't actually add tabs. But if you do want to, I guess, get started and do a more complex website, then I would recommend you to download another, another platform. So for example, you can download Atom. Atom's one that I use. And then there's also Visual Studio Code. And yeah. So yeah, so to answer your question, in W3 schools, we can't add extra tabs. But yeah. All right, so, I mean, yeah, this is good because we can keep answering questions while we add new features. So another thing that we can do that's pretty important is we can add images. So what we can do is, so like say you want to add a picture of yourself or a picture of anything, I guess, a picture of the animals that we've been putting down. But how you start it is, or actually we can just create another header and then we can do like HTML image. Yeah, so yeah, so all we need to do is open up the image tag, and then we put the source. So this would actually be a file that you have downloaded already, but for now we're just going to use a placeholder, which, yeah. But this is like if you download any image onto your own computer, and then you rename the image to, or like you have the image names. So say it's like picturely, then you just want to type that in the source. But you have to make sure that it's in the same directory as where you, or in the same folder as where you have where you have like the rest of your web page. So yeah, so alt is just in case the image doesn't load, then it'll say whatever the alt is. So in this case, if the image doesn't load for some reason, it'll say something random. And then afterwards, you can specify width and the height. So yeah, we can run this. Hopefully this works. Oh, okay, as you can see, it didn't work, but it's the alt works, so it says something random instead. But yeah. Okay. So I think the problem is it's just the wrong document. Maybe Zilpha, you can pull up the other document, because W3 Schools has like a couple pictures stored on their like their web pages. So if you could share that, Zilpha. But in theory, if you had it in the same folder, then it should. Oh wait, I just sent you a link, Zilpha. You can share. Awesome. So here we have the picture is working right here. Awesome. And then if we, I guess, type in the source name wrong, so I guess delete any letter from source, Zilpha. So under the source, like picturely, like you can delete anything in the picturely.jpg, like you can delete the truly. Oh wait, no, sorry, under source equals. Yeah. So if we just backspace one time or something. So say we type it wrong, then we can see that the alt is there instead. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah, so Rosie, to answer your question, the body tag kind of like, because I'm guessing you wrote your text within the body tag. That just it makes it so that even the words within the body tag are gonna get set, like the opacity is gonna get set to 1. So what you need to do instead is actually you can create like an ID selector or like a class selector, like we mentioned in the CSS portion, for the background image. So this way, the tag or the CSS declaration will only be in that, or will only like work for the background image, so it won't override everything in the body tag.
All right, so Kelly, do you want to move on to the rest?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, why is all of this important?
So now that we have like a very basic understanding of web development and what it looks like in actually making web pages, we can actually start to understand why it's important and where it's used. So you actually have a better understanding of the web itself. So it's useful in marketing, designing, development, personal marketing, and many more. And I mentioned personal marketing. What does this exactly mean? Many people that I know and I meet these days are looking into or have built their own websites, which is useful in tracking your progress weekly. It has their resumes, projects, and their other interests. This is great for personal branding, and web development becomes useful here. Since HTML and CSS is the foundation of websites, it's very important to know in starting a career in web development. It's the good thing about web development is that it's very much needed in the real world. So practice, further learning, and practical applications become very important. Because HTML and CSS is so easy to learn, it becomes a stepping stone for new programmers in learning new languages and how they all work together. So yeah, we now have a basic understanding of HTML and CSS. And now you're probably wondering, what do we do going forward? How do we get more information? So we have some resources for you that'll help you get started and covers more content. So W3 Schools is one of the biggest resources in learning programming, and they have plenty of content on web development. As well, it allows you, like how we saw, the ability to try things yourself, and seeing how it all works together. Khan Academy also provides help and tutorials with web development. It's also really cool because if you prefer learning while someone is talking, like in a classroom, you'll have the same opportunity. Front-End Masters is another free tool that provides video tutorials. They have a 21-hour video learning tool. And at the end, you actually are able to make your own project using the tools and skills that you learned. All right, so if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask. To make a personal website, what compiler would you recommend? To make a personal website, a lot of people that I know use the free tools that don't actually have a lot of coding involved. It's better to have like templates of web pages rather than doing it by yourself. So something that people I know use is Wix. There's also there's a whole lot of resources. You could just search them up really quick on personal websites. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like Zolfa mentioned, there's like templates out there everywhere. So it's always easier starting off with a template. But now that you understand like what the tags do and what the CS or how CSS works, then you're able to go into these files and edit it and modify it so that it's what you would like. And I'm just gonna paste in the chat here one of the websites that I use a lot for website templates. So a lot of them are free and they're really cool websites that have, and there's like a lot of them on this bank, in this bank too, where you can use. There's even one for like resume and CV, so you can put up your personal portfolio there.
Okay, we're a little short on time. Oh, there's another question. Are we allowed to use templates for this hack? I believe you're allowed to use anything for your hackathon, as long as it's open and it's open source. So you're not also stealing it from someone else. But yeah, you're probably allowed to use templates like Bootstrap templates and stuff.
Wait, sorry, Hunain, what do you mean by if it's CC? Oh.
Ooh, this is a tough question. Okay,
Wait,
thank you,
would you
Macy.
be able to take this on?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess we can end it off here. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our workshop. So hopefully you have all the basics now down so that you can apply these skills for your TO hacks or for the hackathon. So yeah, good luck everyone on the hackathon, and yeah, have an awesome rest of the week.